Good morning, everyone. Good morning back there. Hey, Dave Sharp. Could I have your attention, please? Mr. Cole, will you quit being so noisy back there? Good morning. I'm Bill Scott from Farm Bureau, and Jim Morris is the timekeeper. He's also the gentleman that sets all this stuff up, so talk to him if you need some more information, or he does have schedules up here up front that you can pick up later. Just to remind you a little bit, most of you have been to a legislative breakfast before. You are limited to a 2-minute question, and hopefully the legislatures can answer you in 2 minutes, or anybody else that can answer the question. To make time more efficient, we've got 3 mics, one up here, which you're more than welcome to use, one over to my right and to my left. If you have a question, I suggest that you get onto the tarmac like an airplane would and be ready right behind the next person. That way we don't waste time walking from one to the other. Now, granted, I assume there's going to be a lot of questions here today, so efficiency is the name of the game. Donuts, coffee, water over there on the side, furnished by the Legion. Thank you, gentlemen, for opening up your facilities for us. Next week, we'll be at the Parish Hall in Virgins. Be sure to be there, especially the Virgins contingency that's here today. That'll be great. So I'm going to start out this morning by having each one of the legislators. Dave's the closest to me and his mouth is full, so I'm going to have him come up and introduce himself first.
Good morning, Bill, and good morning, everyone. I'm Representative Dave Sharp. I serve Bristol, Lincoln, Starksboro, and Moncton. In the legislature, I'm chair of the Education Committee.
Good morning. My name is Chris Bray. I live in New Haven, and I serve along with Senator Claire Ayer in the Senate. I chair the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee in the morning, and in the afternoon I serve government operations.
Hello, I'm Amy Sheldon. I represent Addison 1, which is Middlebury. And I serve on House Fish, Wildlife, and Water Committee.
I'm Fred Baser. I'm from Bristol and serve on Commerce and am a seatmate of Dave Sharp's.
I'm Betty Nuovo, and I'm on the Judiciary Committee from Middlebury.
Good morning. Harvey Smith. I live in New Haven. I represent the towns of Weybridge, New Haven, and Bridport, and I sit on the House Agriculture Committee.
You see how nicely they did that, one right after the other? Great. So the person that's going to do the first question head for a microphone this morning, and we'll start there. Want to remind you that you need to use this like a lollipop. Get close. We do record these, so they're available on the TV sets if you want to look at them. So who's got the first question this morning? And thank you very much, by the way, legislators and senators, for being here this morning. We usually get a great turnout, and we were talking last week, I guess, Jim, about how long we've been doing this. Something like 30 years or so this has been happening, and they've been really good about being here and answering questions, and a good way to listen to the public that they represent. Question, comment, Betty? Okay, now Betty, you're aging us now. Yes. Okay, the more people we get here, the more we find out how old we are. First question.
I'd like to hear a brief summary of the bill that's been presented for the paid sick leave, the pros and cons of either side of it.
Could we have your name and town, please?
Amy Ryan from Salisbury.
And that's another aspect to this. Give me your name and your town.
I can't speak in depth about it because this bill has been developed in the Senate Commerce Committee, our Commerce counterpart, and so it's not been the bill I have worked on, but it is up for it. It was voted last week. And then in a very unusual process, it was sort of withdrawn. It will be revoted this coming week. I'd say the broad outline of the bill is that the notion is that we would like to see everyone who comes to work and is either sick and needs to stay, well, if you get sick, that you should be able to stay home and not necessarily lose pay. And the way you would do that is that you would work over the course of the year and accumulate hours of sick time. And those could actually be applied to your own illness, or it could be a family member was ill. And I can think back to my non-legislative job through this summer and fall, where I was on a production line, and quite often the phone would ring, I'd say at least once a week, and someone would have to leave work because a child was sick. So it would be that you could leave because you were ill or a family member was ill. And the things that have been discussed have been things like how many hours should you work in order to accumulate an hour of paid sick leave, and how would that program be phased in, and what size businesses would it apply to. So it is my hope that we will repass this bill, and then it will apply to all employers. For smaller employers, there's a delayed phase-in of the bill. For larger employers, it would start in 2018. I think it's, I guess when I think about it, there are many jobs where we don't want people coming to work sick, especially people who are handling food and working closely with many other people. Teachers is another thing that comes readily to mind. So the notion is that we will allow you to work, accumulate credits towards time away from work when you're sick, and it will make us healthier and more productive for providing that kind of benefit.
Since nobody's at the mic, go right ahead.
My follow-up question is, does the bill take into account other benefits provided by the employer? For instance, other vacation time or personal days?
Yes. So, in other words, if you're already employer providing time off, that you can, excuse me, in essence, sort of get credit for the fact that you're already providing a similar benefit. The most meaningful distinction that I've learned from listening to people talk through this is that in contrast to vacation time, which you schedule with your manager, typically well in advance, and you need to do that so that the production schedule, for instance, can stay fully staffed and all the rest. Whereas sick time comes up on the spur of the moment with no notice. And I think that is the distinction that this bill attempts to address. But it does give credit for programs that already provide paid time off.
Tim?
I understood that we were going to try to talk about pros and cons of the bill, and not a legislator, but very interested in this particular bill. I fully support paid sick time. That's number one. I'm behind the paid sick time bill as an individual and as a small business person. However, I want to sound another alarm for Addison County, since we're here and talking to our legislators. The disproportionate number of poor and working poor that are receiving Medicaid services in Addison County is becoming unsustainable for providers in this county. So let's take a look at the number of providers, doctors and others, at the number of providers who cannot continue to accept the low Medicaid reimbursement. For example, you're mandating a person to get their sick time at the rate of, in our case, would be $120 a day. Our reimbursement for my business would be $37.25. That $37.25 has been $37.25 for 7 years. I think you need to take a look at the Medicaid providers in the county. Know that we have more Medicaid services being used in this county than any other county, and be very careful of what you do. And we already give sick time to our employees, not mandated. We just give it because we know it's right.
So Senate Finance and Health and Welfare are addressing the reimbursement rate for Medicaid, and it is a clear problem. There's been 2 years running different proposals from the governor on how that might be addressed. The legislature and the administration have failed yet to come to an agreement, and it's early in the session, and I'm sure that something will be, well, I shouldn't say I'm sure. I'm very hopeful that they will come to an agreement that addresses the real problem that Tim is talking about. In terms of the paid sick leave bill, I do believe that under the current version, employers are allowed to reimburse at the rate of the minimum wage. They do not have to replace $1-for-$1 at the full pay rate. But again, I'm not in the committee of jurisdiction. I need to double check that.
Thank you, Chris.
On a slightly different note, think of the richest family in the world, and I'm wondering how much the state subsidizes Walmart workers when you figure Medicaid, earned income tax credit, food stamps, etc. It seems to me one partial answer to this is the minimum wage. Across the country now, there are various moves to set the minimum wage at $15. And it certainly encouraged somebody here to introduce a bill, at least to get it on the table, to get $15 minimum wage in Vermont within a couple of years.
Get your name and town.
Jeff Cobden from Weybridge.
Any more comments or considerations of that item? Maybe you should stay there, Chris.
So, pardon me. In last year, the House and then the Senate worked on a minimum wage bill. I can't quote the numbers off the top of my head, but basically, Vermont as a jurisdiction, as compared, for instance, the city of Seattle or the SeaTac, the airport there are small jurisdictions that have higher minimum wage. But Vermont has put itself on a 4-year trajectory to have, as a state, I think the highest minimum wage in the country. Some people were pushing for higher levels. I think all over the 4 years we get to something in the order of $12 an hour. But it was, politics is listening to two different sides and coming to a compromise. And there were many employers who were interested in having higher minimum wages, but they basically asked us to phase them in a way that they could build it into the cost of running their business successfully. So that worked out to basically something along the lines of 50-cent wage increases 4 years running.
Come right up here, man. Closer, yeah. Take over, Grandma.
My name is Fran Putnam. I'm from Weybridge, and I'm here to talk about a bill you may not have heard about, although it was mentioned in Governor Shumlin's State of the State address. And this is the divestment from coal companies, divesting the Vermont State Employees Retirement Fund from coal companies and also from ExxonMobil. So I'm here to support that initiative because, first of all, I believe we should not be investing in fossil fuel, in any fossil fuels, but in particular coal, which is a very, very dirty industry, and besides which, we're not making money from coal companies and fossil fuel companies anymore because of the decline in their profits. So I'm here to support that and let people know about it, and if you also support it, to speak to your legislators about it.
I'm putting on yet another hat. Senate Government Operations has Bill S-28, which talks about divestment of fossil fuels from the state's energy portfolio. And I should be careful to say that portfolio is not the state's per se, but it's the retirement funds of state employees. So teachers, state police, municipal, I think there's a municipal component, and also state workers. I think we've taken a fair amount of testimony, and I think what is interesting to learn is that it may, although divestment to some people sounds like a radical notion, steering how the portfolio is constructed, The analysis we've seen so far is that it actually would be a conservative thing to do because it would take us out of stocks that have been underperforming in the last 3 years and have theoretically cost the state, the numbers are debatable, but millions of dollars in terms of lower performance. So it may be that whether you think it's the right thing to do environmentally or not, that it may just be that it makes good financial sense for us to move away from these large fossil fuel companies. For instance, a number of very large coal companies have actually declared bankruptcy in recent weeks.
Interesting. Who's next? Could be a short meeting this morning. Mr. Cole? By the way, you better stock up on coal for those socks so you put them in for Christmas.
That's right. Good morning, everyone. My name's Lynn Cole. I'm from Weybridge, but I'm also the director of the Hannaford Career Center here in town. I come to you this morning to especially thank the legislators for their continued support of career and technical education, which I think is the cornerstone of our economic development in Addison County and the state of Vermont. February is National Career and Technical Education Month, so I'm coming here in hopes that you can help me celebrate that. And then as a way of doing that, everyone is invited to our open house this Thursday, February 11th, from 4 to 7 at both of our campuses. For those, our main campus is connected to Middlebury Union High School, 51 Charles Avenue, and our auto diesel or North Campus is off of Manelli Road. So that's kind of what I have to say. No questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd just like to follow up with that invitation from Lynn and just say that one of the fastest growing parts of our Vermont's economy is local food movement in the Working Lands Enterprise program that's out there, and Lynn has really been on the front line of this, and he has a poultry processing facility that he was instrumental in bringing to the Middlebury campus that teaches his students how to process and handle and freeze birds, and I think actually it's USDA inspected, state inspected. And then last year he was able to put in a quick freeze for berries so that the folks in the berry industry could freeze their berries, so we have them locally year-round. And I just talked to him on the way in, and now he's talking about putting together a program with vegetables and adding that to his quick freeze unit that he has. So I just want to compliment Lynn and his supporters out there and the work that he's done in bringing, you know, a strong agricultural presence and teaching the young people that there is a future in agriculture.
Yes, sir.
Okay. David Clark from Middlebury. I'm a little bit out of it, but maybe if somebody could just give me an update. There was a lot of talk a year or so ago about the ethics bill in the legislature for the legislators. What's the status of that?
The House has, so the House and Senate operate independently in terms of how they manage their own members, and I think the House went ahead and passed, or at least created, an ethics panel last year. The Senate looked at, again, this is a government operations task. We took those House rules and we're in the midst of editing them and creating a clearer set of rules for members of the Senate. So that would include things like transparency, making sure that you know what other work, for instance, your legislators do, so that if there are potential conflicts of interest, for instance, you might stand to benefit from passing a bill that affects the industry you work in, that kind of information be laid out clearly. And we already have a rule that says that if you do stand to benefit from a program, it's all right if you are a member of a large class of individuals. For instance, we have many teachers who are in the legislature. It would be unreasonable to say anytime you had something about education to come up, you can no longer vote. But if a bill addresses a very narrow benefit to a narrow group of individuals, and you're one of those people, then you should be recusing yourself from that sort of a vote. Anyway, we're working on a new set of rules to make them more explicit, and just to make sure that the public can see who they've elected, what the influences on them may or may not be, and how they're voting. Nothing has passed yet. It's being drafted and redrafted, and it's going before the Senate Rules Committee. I think then they'll circulate it to the full Senate, and then it will come to the floor, I hope.
Eddie?
I was going to speak on chickens. I have a bill in the House that would allow 5 chickens in people's backyards. We have that already in Middlebury. You can have chickens in your backyard. They're very good. They eat the ticks, they eat the mosquitoes, and with this awful disease that's coming along through the mosquitoes, we need something to eat them up. And it's only 5 hens, no roosters. So you're not going to be worried about having your neighbor's rooster get up every morning and holler at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever. So I'm having some problems getting this out of committee. It's an agriculture committee, and they're very, very busy. So my little bill sort of getting put to the side. So maybe I can get some help from anybody here who's in agriculture to write to the agriculture committee and see if we can't get that bill out. Because the eggs are wonderful and they're good for you. They are really good for you. I've read about all the stuff that's in an egg that's healthy. See, I'm healthy at 84, and I eat 2 eggs a day, every day, all my life.
Thank you, Betty. Ed?
Well, I'd like to keep Ed Payne in Bridgeport. I'd like to keep on with the food stuff. One, I'm just curious if we have realized as much money from our sugar tax as we expected. And the other thing, along in food, did we get enough from the sugar tax to cover all our legal expenses on the GMO? Thank you.
So I'm no longer on Ways and Means, but I'll give this a try. So we did not pass a sugar tax. What we passed was putting soda under the state's sales tax provisions. So we don't break out sales tax. To my knowledge, we don't break out the receipts in sales tax for how many toasters did you sell or how many sugar-sweetened beverages did you sell. So I don't think that information is available for how many soda cans were sold in the state and what tax was received because of it. There is still a sugar-sweetened beverage tax that was passed out of House Ways and Means and sits in the Appropriations Committee. And because of so much pushback on the governor's proposal to levy a tax on healthcare providers, independent healthcare providers, there may be a revived effort to actually do a sugar-sweetened beverage tax. I wanted to, on a slightly different topic, I wanted to recognize the efforts of Representative Nuovo. As you may know, she's publicly announced that this is her last session in the legislature. She has served this community and the legislature extraordinarily well for a very long period of time, and to have her do a farewell tour, if you will, where we can recognize her work in the legislature over a great number of years is really important. And I want to recognize now the work that Betty Nuovo has done for this community and for the legislature.
I see no airplanes by the mics. Oh, Tim?
I was gonna ask while he was still up, but can somebody talk about what we're all going to face on March 1st? Do we know what our school tax is going to be like, or how it's being put together? Do we know what questions we're going to be asked? And March 1st is coming, so would like to get a clarification of what's been repealed and what's been moved ahead and where we are.
Dave, you can come right here if you want.
So this information is all local information, so I got the okay to start, but the chair of the local school board is here, and she's going to give you the details. You know, I think it looks, across the state, I think it looks like school budgets are going to come in pretty darn low. The yield, or how much, last year we changed how we taxed for education in the state. So for 100 years, we have done school taxes by passing a budget and then charging the select board with selecting a rate on the grand list to raise sufficient money to fund whatever budget was passed. So the functionality, and we adopted this at the state level when we did Act 60 and Act 68, and that is we waited until all the budgets came in, and then we set a tax rate according to how much money we had to raise. Which is unlike how we've done state taxes for 100 years, which is basically set a rate. The economists make an estimate of how much money that's going to bring in, and then the Appropriations Committee has to figure out how to divvy up the money and stay within the parameters of what the economists have estimated. So starting this year, we've done the same thing with education taxes. So the state has set the base education income rate at 2%, which 2/3 of our taxpayers pay it based on, and then the homestead penny rate at $1. And our economists and tax department estimate how much money per student that's going to bring in, and that number right now stands around $9,750 on the penny rate, and right around $11,000 on the income rate. Excuse me. And then school boards are going to vote a budget. In many cases across the state, I think maybe virtually all cases, those budgets have gone to the printers. They've been voted by the local school board. They've gone to the printers, and they'll be presented on March 1st at town meeting. And between now and then, school boards will be able to identify exactly what it looks like for a tax rate. And I can't answer that for any specific district, so I'll invite some specific numbers. Thank you.
My name is Ruth Hardy. I'm the chair of the Mary Hogan School Board, and I'm also involved in the Addison Central Supervisory Union, which is the towns of Ripton, Salisbury, Middlebury, Cornwall, Weybridge, Shoreham, and Bridport. So if those of you from other towns, I don't have any information on the other towns, but I can speak in general terms about all of the ACSU budgets, and in specific terms about the ID4 or the Mary Hogan budget. But all of the ACSU budgets came in under the state-imposed spending caps, as they're called, and all of our towns will see tax decreases because of that. all across the board in ACSU, all of those towns. Including the UD3 budget, that came in under, and that will actually see quite a significant tax decrease because of the really good work of the UD3 board and putting together their budget for this year. So the combined tax rate decrease for Middlebury, I believe when you combine ID4 and UD3, it's somewhere in the range of a 6% decrease. Don't hold me to that because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but for Middlebury we'll see quite a decrease, and that is true for all of the ACSU towns. I did also want to let you know, someone asked what will we be voting on town meeting day. So we will be voting on all of our school budgets. In some of the smaller towns, they're done by voice vote. In Middlebury and some of the other smaller towns, they're done by Australian ballot. So at your town meetings I believe all of our town meetings are on Monday the 29th at the evening. We'll be discussing the school budgets and then voting on them either by voice vote that night or by Australian ballot the next day. The UD3 annual meeting is on Thursday, Tuesday, I believe it's the 23rd, and you can go to the high school and hear about the Middlebury Union and Middlebury high school and middle school budgets, and then vote on those on town meeting day. We also will be voting on a proposal to unify the school districts of the Addison Central Supervisory Union, and this is a provision that is under Act 46 that you may have heard about a little bit here. The proposal would unify those school districts, including the UD3 school district, into one school district called the Addison Central School District, and that proposal would mean that our towns would all qualify for some state tax incentives, starting at 10-cent reduction in the first year of unification and then going down to 8, 6, 4, and 2 for the next years. And not only would we have the tax incentives for the automatic tax reductions, we also would get an economy of scale reduction in our tax rate. So when you combine all of our districts, we have more students. So for example, right now in Ripton, there are about 36 students. But if we combine all of our districts together, there would be 1,800 students. So if you think about it in that perspective, 36 versus 1,800 gives you a huge economy of scale, meaning that our school district budgets will be more efficient on a per pupil basis. So for each kid will cost less, essentially, with the economies of scale. And because of that, because of the way the funding formula bases the calculation of tax rate on per pupil spending, because our per pupil spending will go down, our tax rates would go down in all of our towns, including Middlebury. You can find the specific information on the ACSU website. There will also be a mailing coming out to every single mailbox in ACSU that has this information, and there are a lot of upcoming meetings, including the UD3 meeting, our annual meeting, and on tonight, actually, there's an ID4 school board meeting if anybody wants to come to that and ask questions, and there will be a candidate forum because on top of the budget votes and the unification votes, we will also be electing a new school board for this new district. And there will be 13 members on that school board. And that school board will be elected at large, meaning that we all will get to vote on all the members of the board. So this first year, because it's the first time, we would have to vote on all 13 members, and then they would rotate through. So that's the general thing of what we would be voting on town meeting day, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions afterwards about what's happening in your towns. Thanks.
Ruth, this is Spence Putnam from Weybridge, and Ruth has shown herself to be very articulate and clear in describing all this, and I thought she was going to answer all the questions. But I did have one other. I think one of the confusing things about this change is it will actually be electing 2 different school boards in each town, if I'm correct on this. So you were describing the new school board that will be in charge of the new unified district, but don't we also, for 1 year, elect our local school boards again? Can you explain that process a little bit?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So because this is a transition year, if the unification vote passes, and on your ballots, you'll see an article, and each town will have identical ballots. So we'll all be voting on the same ballot, and we'll have the same school board members to vote on in each town. As far as I know, there are only actually 2 contested races for the new school board. In Ripton, there are 3 people running for the Ripton seat, and in Bridport, there are 2 people running. And all the other seats, they're uncontested. But regardless, we'll all see the same ballot. In all of our towns, we've made sure that we're consistent. We've worked really hard to make sure that all voters see the same thing, and even that all towns have the same hours for their elections. There was a slight difference in the hours, so they'll all be open the same, so we all have the same time to vote. But to get to Spence's question, because this would be a transition from our current governing structure of separate boards in all of our towns to one unified board, clearly there's a lot of work that needs to be done through the transition. And so our current school boards would continue to exist until the end of 2017, were this to pass. So until December 31st of 2017, the current 9 school boards that govern these school districts continue to exist. So, for example, in Weybridge, I believe there are 2 seats open on the Weybridge School Board that need to be reelected. So those 2 seats on the current Weybridge School Board would be reelected in Weybridge, plus Weybridge would be voting on a new seat on the board, the new board from Weybridge, plus they all would get to vote on all the seats in all of the towns. So some school board members are going to be on the ballot twice. I mean, I'll just use myself as an example. I'm up for re-election on the ID4 Mary Hogan School Board, so Middlebury voters will see me on that ballot. I'm also running for the new school board, so I'll be one of the 13 names, or actually I guess 16 names you'll see on that side. So it's complicated. There'll be school board members stationed at all of the voting locations in our towns to help you answer questions. We've worked really closely with our clerks, our town clerks. So all of your town clerks hopefully will be able to answer your questions. It will be confusing, but hopefully we'll get through it and be able to move forward. So.
Thank you.
I'm Laura Sermley. I serve with the Middlebury Select Board, so if you don't want to go to the ID4 meeting tonight, you can come to Select Board meeting. Well, we'll be discussing one of our favorite topics, the rail project. And so we really appreciate the work that the state is doing to pay attention to transportation and support this particular complex project, very complex project that we know has great implications for downtown Middlebury. And there have been wonderful community discussions hosted by St. Stephen's and other partners to prepare for that. And it's called Neighbors Together. And I think you've seen some of those, and I know that some of you have participated in that, as I have. So we just really continue to depend on the state to support us in making that a smooth, successful project. I think that Middlebury residents certainly appreciate the value of rail, both passenger and freight, as they do a safe airport, as they do safe roads used by all users, our motorists, cyclists, joggers, etc., all users. So we really do appreciate that, and keep up the good focus and attention on preparing for our transportation future, including electric vehicles and charging stations. So I know it's tough because we have declining funding for transportation as a result of fewer users of the road because of what we know about climate change and an effort to really reduce our carbon footprint related to transportation, which is why rail is so important, which is why a lot of these transitions are so important. But that also creates a conundrum for funding, which is why I support a carbon tax. And I do think that's the right direction to be going in, to build the pool of money that we're going to need for these important changes. So I think that it does need to be a regional conversation. I do hear that, and it's good that Vermont is participating ardently in that and leading that conversation. So thank you for that.
Heidi?
So I didn't get up here early enough. I'm Heidi Willis, and I live in Salisbury. A retired teacher, so I've been looking at the educational reorganization and restructuring with a lot of interest and a lot of mixed feelings. I think we've been in a rock and a hard place. But I'd just like to point out that I'm feeling like, as this reorganization is coming down the road, that this is probably going to be the death knell of town meeting. In Salisbury, our town budget is voted by Australian ballot, and our school budget is voted from the floor. So what you see typically on a town meeting night is a lot of people show up for the school meeting, which is the first meeting, and when the school meeting ends, then half the folks get up and leave. And so now, when we have nothing of any meat to make any decisions about or to discuss, I feel like we're probably going to be losing town meeting. I don't know if that's an intended or an unintended consequence, and I'm willing to bet that may be the situation in other towns. So I'm hoping maybe we can be proactive and figure out some ways to reinvent a meaning for town meeting. It's not only just a part of our tradition and our heritage, but we will need it in the coming years as we're dealing with the impacts of climate change. It would be lovely to have a dedicated day, one day out of the year, to devote to our local town government. I've been told that's a pie-in-the-sky dream, but maybe not. So I'm not sure whether people thought about this as an unintended consequence when this legislation was coming about. I'm not sure if I'm not sure there was any other direction that we could take. But I just think we need to be aware. Do we want to give up town meeting? And if not, what can we do to hold on to it in a meaningful way? So, thank you.
You have an answer for that?
No, I don't have an answer. But I don't think town meeting has to disappear as a result of the Act 46 and its amendment. Some communities, like ours in Bristol, it's really informational discussion concerning schools, because we've gone to Australian ballot, and many things have gone to Australian ballot, and that does take a little bit away from the participatory process at town meeting, and it has been slipping away from us, I think, in recent years, maybe because of the nature of where people work, the accessibility. I'm not quite sure, but I like the lady that just spoke, would be saddened if town government and its role in all our lives and our ability to participate eroded to a point where town meeting was really just a formality. I would like to think that that there's enough important things that go on in communities and that select boards would bring in front of communities. And Act 46 doesn't have to mean that there isn't discussions in communities, that there isn't a participation in communities. It just may have to be done in a different way. We're unique in the United States in that we have no real regional government, as most states do. It's the state of Vermont with a certain amount of control, and then all the individual towns with a certain amount of control. And I hope that continues. I hope governments and towns continue to make an important contribution in everyone's lives. And it is, I think, in our best interest that we in the State House are a little bit sensitive to that, and we don't do things that might further erode things. But I really like to think that the education piece at town meeting, that there'll be a way for us to figure out how to continue to have that discussion, even if it's only on an informational basis.
Thank you, Fred. Lynn?
Lynn Jackson Donnelly from Virgins. If someone could give us an update on the service tax and where we stand with that, that would be helpful.
You have an answer for that, Betty?
No, I didn't come up for that. I came up for two other reasons. One is town meeting. I know in Middlebury, We have town meeting, we do roads, we do staff, we do the budget, of which all these other things come. Very rarely do we even talk about education and school, except for the school budget, which is going to affect the town budget. I think all towns do town meeting for town budgets, mostly. Perhaps some don't, but I know from my experience with Middlebury, it's all town issues. So I don't think we have to worry about that particular point. I also want to talk about the transportation issue on the railroads. Some people don't realize that we have a contract with the State of Transportation Agency. And that contract says Middlebury is in control. They are the ones that are controlling everything. However, the tax agency and department has tried to take over a lot of stuff. And we have to keep that in mind, that Middlebury is in charge. There are a lot of things to be taken care of, parking. I think we have more parking than they state. We have to take care of where the people who are going to work on this are parking. They cannot park in the downtown parking lots, or should not. And then there's the whole thing of where you're going to store the equipment. None of these things have really gotten to the forefront, but they're very important. Where are we going to store the tractors and the pulleys and the whatevers and the materials and stuff? So there are a lot of things to be discussed. Amy and I are working on it when the select board asks us to, or if they ask us to help in this way or that way, we're willing to help in any way we can. But we don't want to take charge, and we don't want to be in charge, because that's the select board's job. So we will do and help the select board in any way they ask us to do.
Fred?
Yes, I wanted to address Lynn's question on the service tax. There's been discussion concerning, even off session, about addressing, looking at taxing services, personal services. That would be like haircuts, pet grooming, things along those lines, many more. The governor's suggestion that we tax dentists and private care doctors, much like they do hospitals now, I guess could be considered a service tax. And it's the only one that I'm aware of that has been put forward for serious consideration. And the scuttlebutt is, I'm not in the Ways and Means or committees that might seriously consider the tax on physicians and dentists, but from what I understand, that's having difficulty taking a second step after the governor's suggestion. But I do think that it may be true in the future that some personal services will be taxed, as we have a lot of stress on the tax for goods that we buy, with so many people buying them online rather than through traditional retailers. So it might be a subject that won't go away and may come up to integrate along with what else we do. But right now, I've not heard of anything that's going to leap out at us.
Hi, my name's Liz Marino, and I'm from Cornwall, and I just wanted to address Heidi's concern, because in Cornwall, we've historically done the town meeting before the school meeting, and after the town meeting, half the group gets up and leaves. So we actually voted last year to flip-flop every other year, because we felt like there wasn't enough participation in the school portion. So I have no worries about town meeting, coming from a town that has, the house is packed and people are there to discuss local issues.
So I am really excited about the conversations that are happening around the state, around Act 46, and responding to trying to do a better job of educating our students within a cost taxpayers can afford. The Constitution requires all of us to educate all of Vermont's children. So it requires us to think beyond our town borders. And that's really what Act 46 has asked communities across the state to do. Look beyond your town borders. Think about larger school districts that can serve your children in a better way at a price taxpayers can afford. And the response across the state has been just really phenomenal. With regard to the democracy question, and I think it's a valid question, I have advocated for actually an increase in democracy. So in my school district in Bristol, Lincoln, Starksboro, Moncton, and New Haven, the formation of an Act 46 district, the first requirement could be that a town meeting be held at Mount Abe for all of the towns to vote on the school budget on the floor and be able to have a conversation about it, be able to have a conversation about what's now the supervisory union budget that no voter has access to, and the Mount Abe budget for which very few people go to that informational meeting. But to instead, with the creation of this new larger school district, create a democratic forum where all the residents of those 5 towns can come together and talk about how their schools are going to be run and how they're going to be funded. So I think we can actually enhance democracy through the Act 46 process, and I think that's an encouraging process that I think ought to take place. Thank you.
Spence?
Well, I think the idea I had is similar to what Dave was saying, because right now I've gone to some of the district meetings for the high school in Middlebury, and 24 people show up and vote on a multi-million-dollar budget. I mean, they don't vote on the floor, and I do think that's a loss. I think being able to discuss the budget on the floor and, if necessary, modify it, that's an important ability that we have. But I think by having a single district, it brings all of those discussions into one forum. Whether or not we adopted the principle of voting from the floor, I think that it might allow us to focus more and not have to think in terms of several different budget discussions. Just have one place where we come together and, as Dave was saying, discuss the educational issues that really do go beyond our town borders. I'm currently the town and school moderator in Weybridge, and it just recently occurred to me I'm going to lose half that job. But I think I can take that. I think it really is a chance for us to renew the focus, and really now all we discuss is the elementary school. So it means that we'll have a place where we can discuss education from K through 12, but we do need to dedicate ourselves to showing up and taking part in that discussion.
I'd just like to comment a little further on Lynn's question, the tax for services, and the answer, and I'm sorry, I don't remember who it came from. My interpretation of that bill is that there's a whole lot more teeth in it than what's been presented. It's not just, you go get a pedicure or a haircut and you get taxed. It's your plumbers, your electricians, your lawyers, your realtors. It's anybody who provides a professional service. And so it's going to affect everybody. And in Vermont, everybody knows we have an affordable housing issue. We don't have good quality workforce housing, and we don't have affordable housing for lower income people. And if that bill gets passed, it's going to affect everybody, not just those folks who are in that lower income bracket or in need of those workforce housing. It's going to affect every single homeowner in the state of Vermont. It's going to make your cost of homeownership increase exponentially, because every time you hire somebody, you're going to be taxed on their labor and their services. So I think it's a little bit more important than just a little tax on things you get occasionally. It's going to be more full circle than that.
We're Natalie Peters, Middlebury. We're ricocheting from issue to issue. I'm following Spence. I lived here 50 years and watched town meetings and school meetings with a lot of affection. over the years. But I think the piece that is really important to understand is that when Vermont was formed, they created a wonderful vehicle locally. Our towns are allowed to have the equivalent of a legislature when you have a town meeting. We vote legislators to represent us to go to Montpelier to do Vermont's business. But in each town, because of the way they structured town meetings, if you go there, you're a legislator. When you have a town meeting or a school meeting, if you show up, you become the legislator, and you're allowed to amend the budgets, bring up issues, talk about anything. If you can inform the people that are there and convince them, you could vote on something that happens in your town, in your school, and you are the legislator. And that's the piece that I find really hard to be giving up, which is what's happening all over the state. And I understand why, and I'm sympathetic. I've served on school boards. Schools have become small, they're expensive, and we do have a problem, and we do have to deal with it. But it is really hard to give up this wonderful vehicle that still exists in Vermont, which is local legislatures. And that's a huge word to use for what a town meeting is, but essentially that's what they did originally when they created the town meeting. And it's a hard vehicle to give up. So I would encourage legislators to think, as Mr. Sharp has, about ways locally, or perhaps build in that you have to have voting from the floor for the school budget and allow people to still do what they've done in the past, albeit a larger group and a larger group of people to service the students better, because our schools have become too small. So it's an issue, and it's important, and I wanted to stick the historical piece in while we're talking about it. Thank you.
I just want to get back to Amy's question about the service tax. I think we're talking about two different service taxes. So the governor's budget this year included a proposal to tax the medical professionals who are not part of the larger, like the hospitals. And then last year there was the proposal, I think that is what Amy's talking about, to tax more broadly service providers like attorneys and things. That bill has gone away for now. Fred may be right that it's going to come back in the future. I think the question, kind of circling back to Tim starting us out of the gate with the Medicaid gaps that we have, is that when these, last year the governor proposed also the payroll tax, and that wasn't very popular. And I guess as a new legislator, what I've started saying to folks is, hey, okay, if you don't like the way that we're proposing to pay for something, bring us your solution to it, because these are vexing problems, and the more ideas we can get, the better off we'll be. But it's easy to say no to every new tax, but there are real things we're trying to pay for that Vermonters do support. And actually, if I have another minute, I would say Fred has put forth a bill to address workforce housing issues that I've signed on to and am helping him move forward. So if you have a chance, pick his brain on that. It's a great piece of legislation that is hopefully going to move through, get some traction and move through the House. So if workforce housing is one of your concerns, I recommend following that bill as well.
Mr. Payne?
We've had a lot of discussion on the school, and economies of scale. God, even Middlebury College has affiliated with, I don't know, a couple other colleges and they're purchasing and stuff. And speaking of scale, I remember Keith Hall, former superintendent, always said that we ought to have one school district within the whole county. And I think we've got just a small start. And then there was another person, I don't recall, it just was a short one on the news that said that we could save 10% on our schools. Now, I don't know what his expertise was, but he sounded like he was pretty good. So we've got a little start. Governor Douglas tried to get things started way back when he was in office, and I appreciate our start, but we've just, we're upgrading the tires, but we really need an engine job and really get down and get our economies of scale. Thank you.
So did you do that deliberately, speak to my heart in terms of motor vehicles, because I was a mechanic for most of my career. So I think the analogy is probably appropriate. You referred to the PICUS report. So as a part of Act 46, we commissioned a study of adequacy. Now, this is an interesting concept. Many states in the United States require, their constitutions require that the state deliver an adequate education. Vermont's constitution does not. Vermont's constitution requires that we deliver an equitable education. So the question has arisen, well, what's the right price? What is an adequate education? So as a part of Act 46, we commissioned PICUS and Associates to look at that question in Vermont, and they recently released their report. It's 300 pages long. I have not had an opportunity to read it. It just came last week. And but in the executive summary and their presentation to our committee, they basically said we probably spend around $164 million, too much money, on education. Of that, $140 million is in special education. We could save another $30 million with the Act 46 consolidation of school districts that we've proposed. So we did look at, our business managers also said that same figure, that we could save $30 million in administrative costs with larger school districts. And this year, we're going to continue to look at special education. The special educators I've talked to so far contest that some of the findings there. For example, they recommend half as many special educators as we currently have. And that's a huge change. I believe personally there are significant savings to be had by doing special education differently. I'm not sure it's going to amount to $140 million, but we're going to look at that in we already did start last week, and we're going to continue to look at that and hopefully come up with some constructive proposals before the end of the session.
I just want to bounce back to transportation and the rail project again, because it is a dance between three levels of government. Middlebury is in charge of certain things. The state is in charge of certain things, and the feds are in charge of certain things. So it's negotiating all of that. It's a very complex project, so we all have to do our part, but it's not just Middlebury's part.
Still have a few more minutes left. Anybody else? Fred, what about the bill you've proposed? Could we hear a little bit about it?
It's come to our attention, and something I think probably a lot of you are aware of, that new construction for housing that would be affordable to people of the median income in Addison County and other counties of the state, mid-50s, 60, even a little bit more than median income, isn't happening organically. Contractors can't build a home that someone who's making 60 grand a year household income can afford. And apartments, for that matter, in areas where apartments are important, whether it's in Middlebury or whether it's up in Chittenden County or over in Windsor County. I think Amy is aware of a Middlebury College study that put an emphasis on housing needs in this area. So what I'm trying to do is jumpstart that process by creating a workforce housing zone, which would kind of go in harmony with neighborhood development zones that were created by the legislature years ago, which focuses on housing development closer to population centers. And the bill is designed to reduce some of the costs that developers realize when they're building. One has to do with, well, the creation of the zone and making sure that the land that we're building on, which is generally high-priced, the cost of building lots close to downtown Middlebury and the like are dear, to make sure that there's a density of housing allowed on those pieces of land so we can reduce the cost of the land per unit. We're also going to pave the way for the permitting process, whether it's the local zoning, whether it's Act 250, or whether it's the Agency of Natural Resources. Not to ignore, but to create a speed pass, if you will, to get through the permitting process. And we're also looking to find dollars to fund building out the infrastructure, whether it's roads, having sewer hookups, and the like, so that the costs of infrastructure are either very modest or have been eliminated. And from what I've learned in my studies, if you can do those three things, you can reduce the cost of housing between 20 and 35%, depending upon the nature of the development and the size of the development project. And my bill is kind of like a pilot project. We're looking to create 2 of these workforce housing zones in the state, one in perhaps some more urban area, like a Chittenden County, although it could be a Rutland or a Brattleboro, and then in a slightly more rural area, to see if we can't get some housing units that workers that we need here, whether it's people we want to hire to work at Porter Medical Center, at Middlebury College, or United Technologies up in Virgins, give them some quality housing, which also will hopefully help us with the housing availability on housing units that are slightly below the median income range and slightly above, if we have more units available. The vacancy rate, I know, in some parts of the state is very low, and the availability isn't great, and so we're trying to move the needle a little bit in that regard. And it should be good for economic development and hopefully good for the basic overall housing stock. And provide jobs, construction jobs, which I think is a good thing because construction jobs generally pay a decent wage.
Chris?
I just wanted to address something that we haven't talked. We talked at our very first legislative breakfast about a lot, but not much today, and that is energy, the changing way that we generate and distribute and use energy in our communities throughout the state. And every week when I read the Addison Independent, I think there's almost always some sparks flying around issues on how we're building projects, how we plan them, and the rest. So I'd say what we're doing in Senate Natural Resources and Energy right now, there's a bill, S-230, and it's, call it our workhorse bill, because it's going to carry out a fair number of related ideas on energy development. And overall, I'd say one of the things we're very sensitive to is that as we start generating energy in ways that we did not used to, namely distributed energy generated in small quantities in many different locations, as opposed to having something very large like a nuclear power plant in Vernon supplying most of Vermont from a single location. As we start building out solar and wind and even more hydro, it's going to have more local impacts. And the question has been, how much of a voice should local communities have in how that build-out happens? Because the old projects were very large and were very expensive, billion-dollar projects, for instance, the rail transmission lines, and they cross many jurisdictions. The state's way of dealing with that kind of utility project, major scale utility project, was to say only the state has the expertise and experience and knowledge required to see how to do that if you're crossing 35 jurisdictions to run transmission lines, for instance. But now we're looking at these very small projects all over the landscape. And I think, so what we're working on right now is to find a new balance between local control in the form of town planning, regional control and regional planning, and state control as through the Public Service Board. And so this is a work in progress, but I just want to reassure people that we hear clearly both the thinking and the feelings around how we make this change in energy generation. And we'll be bringing out a proposal by the first week of March.
A couple minutes left. Any more questions? Comments? We're going to let you go early this morning. On to whatever's next in your schedule. Remind you that next week we're at St. Peter's in Virgins, so come and see us there, please. And thank you very much, all of you, for coming. You make the day when you show up.